Voyager's taking a look at a space donut, possibly to go with Janeway's copious coffee. They're all referring to it as a planet, which seems a bit suspect to me, but they've got sensors and stuff, so we'll defer to their opinion. It looks big, swirly, and dangerous, which means Janeway wants to give it a poke. For science. The obvious happens, and after we lose control of the engines, we're pulled towards it while our shields do flashy things. Down on the surface of planet Krispy Kreme, a civilization that we can probably assume is pre-warp exists. A bit of shaking interrupts either an offering to the gods or a picnic. The worshipper/diner looks to the stars and sees a new, bright one appear. We can't see for certain from this distance, but I suspect it's distinctly Voyager-shaped. It's caused quite a stir in the village, and when someone who looks like a leader learns that the star and the shaking appeared as one of them was making an offering, they assume the star to be a new god who demands their own tribute. We may have just accidentally buggered the Prime Directive, but at least we're getting some free fruit out of it. The good news is that Voyager's stopped falling. The bad news is that we didn't do it. Seven calls us to astrometrics and spits out a load of science bollocks, but the gist of it is, this planet runs faster than everything else around it, Voyager got stuck in whatever's doing it, and us being here is causing earthquakes on the planet. We should probably scarp her under the circumstances, though that's easier said than done. All the science bollocks is still knocking out our engines, and B'Elanna thinks that won't change anytime soon. Chakotay says the answer may be in learning more about the planet, a suggestion that also happens to tie in with his interest in anthropology, presumably twinned with his previously declared interest in archaeology. After all, if there are people on the surface, then a probe sending back regular data would give us the chance to observe the development of an entire species. Speaking of which, the descendants of the tribe we saw before have survived the earthquakes we're causing, so far at least, and are now somewhere in their equivalent of the Middle Ages. The advancement is such that their current leader thinks the stars are not gods, but instead house other cities much like their own. That's why he plans to send a letter via hot air balloon to the ruler of the brightest one, the one his ancestors named Earthshaker, and ask if they wouldn't mind knocking that shit off. They're even willing to slip us a few bob to sweeten the deal, or possibly just to distract us from the fact that they're writing in English. Voyager's shat out a probe, and it's sending back a whole load of pictures from the surface. That means we can now see the city below us, though it's moved on a bit from the last one we saw. Based on the gases we can detect, they've developed engines and heavy industry. Makes sense. If you lived on a planet that had earthquakes every few days, you'd develop heavy industry as fast as you could too. B'Elanna thinks they're using iron to reinforce their buildings and stop them from getting buggered up by the quakes we're causing. If they're advanced enough for the industrial era, they've probably got half-decent telescopes too, and Chakotay suggests they're likely watching us. We're about to lose our ability to watch back. The closer a thing gets to the planet, the faster time runs relative to Voyager. As far as the probe we launched is concerned, it's been doing this shit for around 200 years now, and has decided it's had enough. At least we managed to make it self-destruct so we don't contaminate them with advanced tech. We've already bollocksed the Prime Directive quite enough for one day. Not that they seem to need our help on the science front. They've made it to around an early 20th century level from the looks of things, and their observatory telescope has given them a pretty good look at Voyager. Or should I say the Sky Ship? That's more bloody awful news for the Prime Directive, but there is an upside. One of our new scientist friends has rationalized that anybody capable of building what they're looking at could wipe the floor with them, and that means the earthquakes probably aren't a deliberate attack. And he wants to prove that by calling us on the radio. A shame he'll probably be dead before we get a chance to respond. I suspect Janeway would have quite liked him. The radio signal is received by Seven and Chakotay in astrometrics, and, after slowing it down, we hear the scientist greeting us and, like the leader before him, asking us if we wouldn't mind knocking that earthquake shit off. He also invites us to call back, or, if we're of a mind, pop down and say hi. The fruit's probably gone bad by now, but it's the thought that counts. Paris thinks he deserves an answer, but there are two problems with that. The first is that they're still pre-warp, so contacting them is a big no-no. The second is that the guy in question died 100 years ago from our perspective. Seven's Borg minibots might be able to resurrect the dead, but even they're going to struggle with a century-old skeleton. Chakotay argues that, as we're already a part of their history, contact might not be the world-shattering event we'd normally expect of non-spacefaring species. In a way, we already made first contact. Janeway's not convinced, but Chakotay adds that popping down to the surface might give us more data on the planet and mean that we can escape. That would ultimately stop the interference that we're already causing, those earthquakes. We may have successfully sent a probe into low orbit of the planet, but that doesn't mean crew members would survive the trip. The Doc seems to agree for us filthy meatbags, but thinks he could take a little jaunt without any problems. How much of that is based on his medical knowledge and how much on his taste for away missions is another matter. Still, this is more agreeable to Janeway, and she relents, allowing him to take the trip with the express purpose of being an observer and not getting involved. I'm sure that will definitely turn out as planned. As an added bonus, because he's a hologram, he can change his appearance to match the native life. If anybody's worried about how long the battery on his mobile emitter will last, they've not mentioned it. Here's hoping it's quite efficient and he doesn't need his own power plant to top up. Chakotay's been going over information in astrometrics about the current political situation on the planet. I guess we must have solved the problem that made us need to use a probe previously. Regardless, the group who sent us the radio message is one of 26 different states, and handily they're one of the more open-minded societies. Seems like a good place for the Doc to start, and the plan is to send him down for 3 seconds. That'll be nearly 2 days on the surface, he's told, which doesn't match what Seven told us earlier about 1 second being almost a day, but let's ignore that for now. Either way, it should be plenty of time to grab some data on the planet from whatever scientific source he can find. Gee, I wonder what would happen if something went wrong with the teleport and he was stuck down there for longer. Not to worry, I'm sure that definitely isn't going to— oh shit. The search for him begins, and after a bit of a faff, we manage to find him again and bring him back on board. He says it's been over 3 years for him, which, based on my highly scientific process, means our search took about half an hour. It also means he's been able to recharge somehow based on having to conserve his battery back in the Season 5 episode Gravity. Anywho, he's had quite the adventure and starts to tell us about it. He doesn't tell us what the people on the planet called him while he was there, but I'm sure the plot element of his name will be swiftly and satisfyingly concluded. What he does share is that the natives know nothing about Voyager beyond the fact that we appeared centuries ago, and we're probably responsible for the earthquakes. Apropos of nothing, he also implies that he got some shagging in too, the dirty little bastard. Still, at least he's come through with the goods. He's memorized weather reports from a period of a few hundred years. Some are more accurate than others, obviously, but we might be able to find a pattern from them, and the Doc is told to upload the data so we can do a science to it. And we'll remove his forehead chuff while we're at it. Before he goes, he warns Janeway that we might have some issues shortly. While we've been a catalyst for progress and culture on the surface, not everybody holds us in high regard, what with the whole earthquake thing and all. In fact, there was some talk of rocketry down there, and a race among states to be the first to reach us. Whether such a rocket will be docking or impacting depends upon who gets here first. Sounds dangerous, but at least it'll make an interesting subject for Naomi's astronomy report. She's chosen to write about this planet and will call her project The Weird Planet Where Time Moved Very Fast and So Did the People Who Lived There. I think it's a banger personally, but Seven suggests it might be a touch long. Bit harsh when she was the one to tell Janeway that shortening 7 of 9 to simply 7 made it imprecise, but maybe she's learned to appreciate the efficiency of it. They workshop the title of the project, but the rest will have to wait. We've scienced the Doc's data and think we have a plan to get us out of this planet's pull. We give it a go, but despite it working for us, it's also causing more severe earthquakes, so we have to knock it off. Let's hope the people on planet Krispy Kreme didn't see that as some sort of escalation on our part. We may shortly discover just how the inhabitants intend to deal with us. They've launched a rocket, but at least there are people on it, so the plan probably isn't to just blow us up. The astronauts lose contact with the surface of the planet as they ascend, radio signals from them having become merely a high-pitched whine, and the implications of this make me hope that neither of these people has a family. They might have lost contact with Mission Control, but they're here to have a poke about, and that's what they're going to do. Handy then that the docking ports on Voyager are such that they're compatible with our guests. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and suggest they built something that can adapt to any port. At least them being able to bypass the lock is believable, based on how Starfleet handles security. As they're climbing through Jeffrey's tubes, one of them has a bit of a turn for the worse, but they press on. Is it time fuckery, or did we just give them a few thousand different alien germs because they're walking around with their helmets off? I'm going with option 1, not least of which because they find the Voyager crew frozen, at least from their perspective. Some more exploring finds this to be the case all over the ship, and the other astronaut is starting to have health problems too. Here's hoping that they don't cark it. It's going to be difficult enough convincing people that the earthquakes were an accident without delivering 2 corpses at the same time. They continue exploring, and after finding a map on a terminal, decide to visit the bridge. They pop out of the briefing room, which doesn't have Jeffrey's tube access according to schematics, just saying, and continue having a look around while trying to understand what's going on. They don't get the chance. Time catches up with them and their bodies don't seem to care for it. Voyager restarts after they collapse to the floor, which is obviously a bit of a surprise for the bridge crew. Tuvok calls an intruder alert and grabs his gun, which is a nice touch as we go to sickbay with our new guests. Despite the doc's best efforts, one of the astronauts has done a dead. Switching to our speed was not a gentle transition, but at least we still have a live one, and thanks to the doc's time on the surface, he knows how to sort the guy out. We wake him to discover that he's already figured out he's dealing with time fuckery, so we get to bypass the bulk of the explaining to him. He deals pretty well with the news that we're not overlords who've been casting a watchful eye over them all for centuries, but actually just incompetent explorers who can't resist the urge to poke a new science wibbly. He also does a fair job of accepting that everybody he ever knew is already dead, which, based on our earlier calculation and an assumption of 80 years to make sure everybody's carked it, means it's been nearly 13.5 hours since he switched to our speed. Janeway asks him for a little help understanding the data gathered by the Doctor, but that request comes with a catch. Every second he spends here makes his home more different to the one he knew, so he's free to return, if he chooses. But being on the skyship is a dream so many of his people have had all of their lives, and he's not going to walk away now. To be fair, it's not like he has anybody to get back to anymore, and he's going to be famous as shit no matter when he returns, so I don't suppose it makes much difference to him either way. The Doc takes him to Astrometrics, having a chat about a local sports team on the way. It must be successful to have survived for so long, despite the Doc's dismay at their recent performances. Our guest helps us with the data, their methods having been refined somewhat since the Doc was there, and we compensate for the flaws he tells us about. A chat about how planet Krispy Kreme differs from the rest of the galaxy is cut short by a flash on the surface. They're experimenting with antimatter, and they're getting good at it. So good, in fact, that they've started throwing fireworks at us, which is a bit fucking rude when you consider that they should be advanced enough now for the earthquakes to be little more than a nuisance these days. We can't call them, apparently, because they don't know how to accept our messages. Bit odd that we don't try to adapt it for them, but maybe getting shot at has put everybody off. Paris wants us to poop back because Tom Paris is, occasionally, still a dick. Chakotay shuts him down. We're the ones who started this shit, after all. It may not be us who finishes it, though. Janeway thinks our astronaut guest is the best chance we have for an ambassador. The teleporter's buggered, but that's probably for the best. People appearing out of thin air may not be the best way of convincing them that we come in peace. His own ship is still attached to Voyager, of course, so we'll send him down in that. As the Doc doses him up with meds to make the transition, he drops the absolute fucking bombshell that he had a son while he was down there for 3 years. He isn't forthcoming on how he managed to do that, and we haven't the time to ask. We also learn that being able to decide a name for his offspring was apparently easier than himself, and he asks our guest to find out what happened to Jason and maybe tell his descendants about their holographic ancestor. The astronaut launches and tries to contact his control center. Slight problem though, it no longer exists, and he instead connects to a weather station. They refuse to connect him with the right people, which I think is fair enough considering he's claiming to be someone long dead, but I think it's a bit odd that they've not seen his ship by now. He's going to fix not being seen soon enough by telling them he plans to splash down in a lake. Back on Voyager, we're still being kaboomed, and they're getting better at it, too. Janeway and Chakotay have a chat about our ambassador and assume he failed, which is an odd thing to say given that the only reason they've got the chance to have that conversation is because the impacts have stopped. Another couple of launches are detected and Janeway assumes the worst. Rather than impact, they pull alongside us and spit out tractor beams. Paris thinks he can break us free, but Janeway overrules him because she wants to see where this is going. The answer is away from planet Krispy Kreme. They pull us free of the wibbly that was holding us and we give them a call to say thanks. They do one better by teleporting our astronaut ambassador over to us. He can't stay for long, sadly, as the flashy gizmo he's wearing will only last a few minutes. Still, it was nice of him to come and say goodbye, even if he didn't bring any news about what happened to the Doc's son, Jason. He disappears, and we prepare to leave. Down on the surface, an old and grey version of the astronaut watches the brightest star wink out as we fly away. There was a point in this episode, it was either the second or third of the shots showing how the native species had progressed, where I thought to myself, hold on a minute, they've nicked this from Civilization 3. Now, I was certainly wrong on that point as the episode came out before that game. In fact, Civilization 3 wasn't even the first game in the series to use such a view, albeit with somewhat less fidelity. It's a fair bet that they nicked the idea from somewhere else too. But it got me thinking about why I was enjoying this episode. It links in with a desire many of we silly humans have, that of wanting to see something grow. There's a crossover here with the appeal of certain video games. We enjoy the progression. There's a reason why Minecraft is currently the best-selling video game in history, something unlikely to change anytime soon. And before you start furiously typing in the comments section, no, I'm not including mobile games in that, as they tend to be ranked by downloads or overall revenue rather than simply sales. How long a distinction between the two markets will remain if traditional publishing companies get their way is another matter. Anywho, part of Minecraft's appeal is the versatility, of course, but the main pull is that of starting with minimal tools and making progress, regardless of the goal. In an abstract way, the creators of popular mods for the game are doing this very same thing, but on a different level. There's a whole subset of such games, of course, depending on how deep you want to go into the creation aspect, and I confess I'm a little biased on the topic as I'm rather partial to them, but their success speaks for itself. It's also the reason why children's toys are so often framed around the theme of building. We're hardwired for it seems, many of us at least, and it would not surprise me to discover the Venn diagram of spicy brains, building games, and science fiction looks like a slightly lumpy circle. I suspect that's why this one resonates with so many viewers. I don't tend to put much stock in rating systems, but IMDb shows this as being the most popular episode of the season. There are earlier episodes of Voyager that I personally prefer, but I still very much enjoyed this one and can absolutely see why it's held in such high regard. As an additional treat, there's also a little dip into the origins of myths and legends. We see in real time how the opinions of random people in power become the basis of cultural curiosities many generations later. The fire fruit falling from an altar during the first quake makes it sacred, largely on the say-so of some chucklefuck who, if we're being blunt, was probably tripping balls. Protector Kellermain many years later scoffs at such backward superstition, whilst also giving the fruit a wide berth, just in case he's wrong. That same Protector Kellermain believed Voyager was a city with its own protector. His opinion became, over time, the story a scientist was told when he was a child, that the skyship was really a palace ruled over by an evil protector. They're nice touches that play into that same desire for growth, and pull everything together with threads of continuity, something that could otherwise have left the story feeling disjointed from the regular changes of cast. Come to think of it, that reminds me of the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, a collection of stories tied together by the theme of a semi-mythical central entity. Voyager is their Harry Seldon, in a way. There's a lot to like in this one, and I think part of that is because we spend a fair portion of it away from Voyager. That's not meant as disrespect towards the main cast, but a change of scenery and pace can do wonders. After nearly 5.5 seasons of largely the same people and ship, that's to be expected. It's a credit to the writers then that they were still able to create little surprises here and there like this episode. Such examples are no small part of why we're still talking about these shows decades later. End of episode.
That's a shame.
What's a shame?
That we didn't manage to teleport Paris down to the last planet. The one where time runs fast. He'd have been dead before they figured out how to get him back.
That's bloody harsh, that is.
What do you mean?
I mean it'd be harsh on the planet. Can you imagine him being their god? Tom fucking Paris being in a position to influence an entire culture. Every third building would be a pub. Government-mandated wet T-shirt Tuesday. Within 6 months he'd ground all scientific progress to an halt. We might as well just drop a nuke on the poor bastards. It'd cause less damage.
Fair point.
Besides, he'd have enjoyed it. We want him to suffer. Woof.